I want to chase. I want to, I want to travel around the world and chase famous models. It started out with, tall, skinny bitches, like when I was in high school. Looking at magazines and saying that she's fine. I want to meet this hoe. I want to meet this hoe. Then
Full disclosure, I have not watched the documentary On the Record. I didn't want it to influence my opinion on the accusations against Russell Simmons. I know it doesn't make logical sense or whatever, but I just want to do like maybe a follow-up video after I watch the documentary. A lot of people are talking about it, saying that it's really great and that we need to, or that people need to check it out and kind of shed some light on it, because we know it's been overshadowed by you know what for obvious reasons, but it is streaming right now on HBO Max if you guys want to check it out, and hopefully I will be able to do a follow-up. Okay, let's get into it. Where do you even start with this bullshit? For real, I've been following this story since the first accuser, and it is like the most convoluted story I have ever followed. There's so many actors, there's so many players in this whole thing. People have pulled out, people have pulled in. I just don't know where to begin with this whole thing. Stories have changed. Like, what is the truth? This one has been exhausting for me. I'm excited to report on this story or talk about it or have discussion with you guys, but this is a lot of information. I may have to do even a part 2. So first of all, there's the Breakfast Club interview that he did like 2 weeks ago, where he was given a huge platform to refute his accusers' claims and reduce their assaults, or their alleged assaults, to merely him being guilty of being a playboy. I'm sorry, but he was laughing way too much in that interview for me. It was very uncomfortable. Or do I start with his response to the allegations, the statements that he's put out to the press? Or do we start with this disgusting so-called investigative article that was published by Ebony Magazine, How to Kill a Mogul in the Era of #MeToo, where a black man who I allege is Russell's friend, allegedly he's Russell's friend, he takes it upon himself to go on a campaign to discredit several of his accusers. So definitely check that out, because it's a hot mess. You know what? Let's just do this. Let me do this. Let's just start at the beginning, and I'll give you a little bit of background information. So at this point, Russell Simmons has been accused of sexual assault and sexual harassment to varying degrees by about 20 different women. Now, if you listen to his side of the story, it's only about 6 or 7 women, but no one believes that, Russell. No one believes that. So the accusations against him started pouring in around 2017 at the height of the Me Too movement. Of course, Russell has denied it all. You know, he was just an innocent little rock star that was chasing models, not raping models. But yeah, he has denied it all, and allegedly he has fled to Bali, where he cannot be extradited to the United States in the event that he is brought up on any criminal charges. So about his stay in Bali, I actually think what happened is that he allegedly fled over there because of this $10 million lawsuit that's out against him. In 2018, Jane Doe, as she's referred to in the records, sued him for $10 million. She said that he had raped her and threatened her young son at a concert or whatever. She brought a civil lawsuit against him, and they were in negotiations to settle the case, right? So according to the court documents, once they went to settle, I guess certain admissions had to be made and evidence had to be presented. And in her original claim, she did not include the date of the incident, but for the settlement package, she had to do that, and she said it was in 1988. So based on that, she was outside of the statute of limitations. So Russell and his lawyers asked for a summary judgment from the judge, which means the judge will make a decision based on the evidence presented to him without a trial, and the judge threw out his motion. So once all that went down, it looks like Russell went ahead and packed up his shit and sold all his stuff and allegedly fled on to Bali. Because if not, he would have to settle that lawsuit with that woman, and then probably more to come. Allegedly. He did mention the lawsuit in the Breakfast Club interview, but he was really arrogant about it. He's like, oh, it's gonna get thrown out. I wouldn't be so sure about that, bruh. But I guess we'll see. The other thing about his quote-unquote stay in Bali is that he mentioned in the Breakfast Club that he got stuck in Bali once the Big C came around, and that's bullcrap, because the media has been reporting that Russell has been there since 2018. So if the Big C didn't come around until the end of 2019, how are you stuck? I'm just saying, I think he's starting to believe all these lies. I think he has convinced himself that he is truly innocent. It's very weird. So the other thing I want to talk about, or the other thing I want to mention, is how several black men have gone on campaigns to defend him and discredit his alleged victims. One man in particular, whose name I won't mention, is a prominent figure here on YouTube. I believe even outside of YouTube, he's prominent in kind of like the black business world. I'm sure some of you know who I'm talking about. But he, in my opinion, has put his reputation on the line by creating a series of videos that defend Russell Simmons and discredit one of his accusers. So for some reason, he is dead focused on this one woman in particular. He said that he knows her outside of this whole thing and that she's not to be trusted. So in his series of videos, he talks about how this one woman shouldn't be given a voice because she has a history with drugs and alcohol, and she's known to sleep around, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So I don't know. I'm like really disappointed in him because I thought that he was a little bit more progressive, a little bit more forward thinking by the way he comes off and the way he says his credentials are. So for him to take these old antiquated ideas of rape and sexual assault and victim credibility and create a whole freaking series of videos trying to discredit somebody like this. I'm like, this is the Twilight Zone. Anyway, I also think it's important to mention that this woman in particular has actually admitted in her books that she has had a history of drugs and alcohol. Yes, and she admitted that she used to sleep around or whatever. But to me, him throwing that out there about her makes me feel like that just strengthens her claims, and here's why. She said that she had known Russell. I guess they had went out, they had been I think they had dated at some point, something like that. So she admitted that they had a relationship previously. So if they had done that, that would mean to me that Russell would have to know that she had a history of drugs and alcohol. And she, in her book, talks about how the night in question, this incident night, they had gone out partying together and that she was drunk and she went back to his house. So she said that she couldn't fight him off because she was so drunk. So to me, that says that Russell knew who this woman was, and based on her history, he would have to know on some level that she could not consent to sex with him. So you guys tell me what you think, but that's what I think about that situation. I don't think that this guy on YouTube trying to discredit her proves anything. But anyway, let's move on. I actually want to talk about Russell's responses to this whole thing because I believe his responses are the most telling and the most damning pieces to this puzzle. So I won't read all of his responses verbatim, but I will read portions of them because I want you guys to catch on to the theme here. And I believe these specific responses to the allegations are beyond him just releasing something for the press. Okay, this first one says, I have never committed any acts of aggression or violence in my life. I would never knowingly cause fear or harm to anyone. Let me be crystal clear and very direct. Abusing women in any way, shape, or form violates the very core of my being. In this one, he's talking about Jenny Lamette and her accusations. He says, while her memory of that evening is very different from mine, it is now clear to me that her feelings of fear and intimidation are real. While I have never been violent, I have been thoughtless and insensitive in some of my relationships over many decades, and I sincerely and humbly apologize. This next one. In my case, 3 witnesses have signed statements that our experiences that weekend with Carrie 26 years ago were consensual. My longtime loathing of any form of violence and abuse has been woven into all of my personal interactions. Carrie never accused me of what she had said publicly. She insisted I was not violent. And this is the last one I'll read. I have issued countless denials of false accusations against me. I have lived my life honorably as an open book for decades, devoid of any kind of violence against anyone. I'm sorry for the emphasis on violence, but I'm trying to be on the nose with this because Russell mentions that he is not a violent person in almost every single response that he has issued. And based on his responses, I believe that he's operating from a place and a notion that is old and antiquated. It's this old definition of rape that basically a man would have to hop out of the bushes, knock you over the head, rape you, be a stranger. He definitely had to be a stranger. And then after all of that, she would have to be a virgin, she'd have to be sober, and she would have to be dressed like a librarian. And then she would have to head off to the police. She would have to head off to the police station promptly and issue a statement or file a complaint. After all that, then you may be considered a rape victim. And I'm not even trying to be facetious. Like, this is how it really was. Because up until very recently, the law had a set of rules and requirements to make the claim of rape. And there was one thing in particular called the resistance requirement. Meaning, if you were going to press charges against someone for raping you, you had to prove that you tried to physically fight them off and that they had beat you up, they had physically forced you, whether it's a choke, slap, punch, whatever the case, stab you, whatever, you had to prove to the police that you had been literally forced to have sex with this person. And that's how it was up until very recently. And to be honest, I don't even think all of the states have gotten rid of that rule, because rape law is based on the state. It's state by state. So it's on a state by state basis. But anyway, New York, where most of the incidents that involve Russell Simmons happened, is a consent-based state. So getting back to his denials, that is the main reason I feel like he is guilty. Him talking so much about not being violent, to me, just says that he believes that because he didn't knock somebody over the head or punch him in the face or kick him or whatever, that therefore, like, he could not possibly have raped any of these women. Like, to me, that just says it all. It's the way he said it, the way his statements are situated. Like, to me, it speaks volumes. And also the fact that this man was in power and there was really no one to call him out. Like, you can't tell me that he didn't abuse his power. You can't tell me that. For example, with Drew Dixon, from what I remember her story, he hired her as an executive right out of college. She had just graduated from college when he hired her. So why would he hire someone who had no experience as an executive for a record label? Does that make sense to you? And I'm just speculating here, but what I think happened with Drew Dixon is he hired her under a quid pro quo situation that she didn't even know about. Like, you do something for me and I'll do something for you. I think she didn't realize the terms and conditions of this relationship they had, and he thought of it as, well, this is the price of admission. So those are my thoughts on it. You let me know what you think about Drew Dixon's story. So the last thing I want to talk about is this article that was published by Ebony Magazine that was written by a guy named Stacey Brown, who calls himself an investigative journalist. It was released in March of this year ahead of the documentary coming out. I think they just wanted to make sure that Russell got his side of the story out. So the premise of the article is that black men for centuries have been falsely accused of rape and sexual assault, and since there's no physical evidence in any of these cases, we need to not hold black men accountable, specifically this rich black man. He needs to not be held accountable. It really is a disgusting article. I mean, it's really bad. I'm not going to read the whole thing to you guys because it's actually very long. I just want to touch on a few points that they hit. It starts off talking about how the Me Too movement is so useful in many ways, I guess, for women, but don't believe these particular women. So he goes person by person, discrediting and kind of smearing their names. So that's what I want to talk about, is just some of the things that were said. And as I read through this, I think it will become very evident that Russell is allegedly behind this, because some of this information in here I feel like only he would be privy to. So I think that this guy is actually probably buddy with Russell. I also noticed that Russell has been doing a lot of like press with this guy. Like, he's been coming on his little radio show and all that. So allegedly, I think these are really Russell's words, and he's propped up by somebody. Someone is taking the heat for him on this. Allegedly. And the reason I think that is because it will be in poor taste for Russell to discuss the accuser's sexual behavior, their sexual history, their reputation, but if someone else does it, it's not that big of a deal, right? Especially in the court of public opinion, where he would take a lot of heat. Pew, pew. If he had the gall to get out and write an article or to go on a show and start discussing their histories and trying to discredit them. So, I mean, you guys make up your own mind. Let's get into it. So the first person that this article attempts to discredit is Drew Dixon. So the article mentions that there was a letter written to Oprah Winfrey from an intern of Drew Dixon where she describes her experience. Drew Dixon had mentioned that she never wanted to be alone with Russell Simmons because he kept making advances towards her, so she would do everything in her power to not be alone with him. So in this supposed letter that was addressed to Oprah Winfrey, this intern says that that's actually not the case. What really happened is that Drew Dixon had gone to his house with her several times, and that she was made to sit in the taxi cab or the limo or whatever mode of transportation they took there and wait for her to come down. And in that time, she never really suspected anything. She said that Drew Dixon's demeanor never changed. She never saw her crying or upset or anything like that. She also went on to say that Drew Dixon had gone to his house alone several times. So how could she have been afraid to, if she was really afraid of Russell, why would she go to his house or whatever, blah, blah, blah. So that's all fine and dandy if that's what this supposed intern wrote in. But my question is, how did this investigative journalist, the Stacey Brown guy, get a hold of this supposed letter? If it was addressed to Oprah Winfrey, how did he get a hold of it? Keep in mind that Russell and Oprah used to be friends. So is this something that was sent to Oprah Winfrey that she shared with Russell Simmons, who in turn gave this to Stacey Brown, and then he published it? You let me know. I'm just trying to say, how did he get this letter? Because as far as we know, Oprah said the reason she pulled out of the documentary was because her and the filmmakers had creative differences. She never mentioned this letter, period. So where did this letter come from? How did this turn up all of a sudden? I'm just saying. Moving on. The next person that the article mentions is Sherry Hines, who was a member of Mercedes Ladies, the rap group. She's the one that said that she had ran into him at a hotel, and then he invited her to see his new office that was around the corner, and that's where he raped her. So the article asserts that Sherry is lying, and they say it's because the hotel in which she said that she ran into him at before the rape happened closed 5 years earlier in 1978. So I went ahead and looked that up, and that's actually not true. So the hotel is called Hotel Diplomat, and it actually closed after 1990. They had an application for a demolition in 1989, but it couldn't go through because the building still had tenants up until 1990. So Sherry said that it took place in 1983. The hotel wasn't closed until after 1990. It's all out there on Google. Okay, so I'm going to move on to the final woman I'm going to talk about. The article actually mentions two more, but I'm not going to go into all those because this is getting a little long for me. So the next one they talk about or try to discredit is Salah Abrams. I think that's how you say her name, Salah. Anyway, here's one of the things the article said about her. Salah Abrams, another accuser whose story is chronicled and on the record, wrote in her book that she was, quote, in no state to recall the events, end quote. That is not true. What she actually said is that she had gone out drinking with Russell when she had come back home from Italy. She said, I was barely coherent. I was in a drunken stupor. I could not fend him off when he climbed on me and in spite of my protestations, forced himself on me. When I woke up the next day and remembered what had happened the night before, I snapped and grabbed a bottle of prescription pills. She tried to commit suicide is what happened. The article goes on to assert that Abrams is lying, that Russell Simmons had apologized for sexually assaulting her after this suicide attempt, but I want to read another little portion of her book. So in reference to whether he apologized to her, in her book, she says that she was out of her mind in grief and that she went as far as to call him, her family, and then her friend Carol to tell them what she had done. In other words, she had told them that she was trying to commit suicide. So she said that it was her friends and his personal assistant that took her to the hospital. So the way the article reads is like he didn't have any communication with her after that. So if he wasn't concerned about her, why would he have his assistant take her to the hospital? And you know, Russell tries to paint himself as the good guy. So you really, are you telling me that he didn't apologize to her after she tried to commit suicide? Come on now. So anyway, that's all I'm going to read from this disgusting article. I think you guys should definitely try to read it and see what you think about it. What are your opinions on it? It's a little messy to me, but this is basically, my thoughts on Russell Simmons and why I believe that he's guilty of this. You guys let me know what you think in the comments. I'm sure some of you men especially will have, or will take issue with what I said. And that's cool. We can talk about it in the comments, but you guys let me know what you think. Please like, subscribe, and share the video, and I will see you all in the next one. Bye.